You were told a fairy tale about a noble rebellion. The truth is far more cynical. This is not a story about a hero, but about a revolutionary who understood that to overthrow the old regime, one must use its own dirty methods. Zeus did not just fight his tyrannical father, he schemed. He forged alliances in the darkest pits of Tartarus, promising freedom to those even his own father feared. Victory in war is only the first step. The real game begins when it's time to divide the spoils. They say they drew lots, a random choice that decided the fate of the cosmos. But do you believe in coincidences like that when absolute power is at stake? Or was it the most brilliant deception in history, laying the groundwork for millennia of betrayals, wars, and divine scandals that would determine the fate of us all? When Zeus came of age, he returned not as a supplicant, but as an avenger. He forced his father to disgorge his prisoners, and in that moment, upon the ruins of the old world, two armies stood. On one side, the Titans, ancient and mighty. On the other, their own children, the young gods, whose hearts burned with a thirst for justice and power. The heavens held their breath. The Titanomachy had begun. For honor, he roared, a battle cry that tore through the air like an open wound. But Gaia saw the truth in his eyes, a flicker of fear, a silent scream of a question. Was honor alone enough to save them? Caden, Gaia cried, but the words drowned in the roar of the Titan, a monstrosity that towered above them, an embodiment of their darkest nightmares. Its breath was the wind of despair, and as it swung its massive arm, the world seemed to slow. Every heartbeat was a drumbeat, heralding their doom. Time stood still. Gas felt the weight of his decisions pressing down on him, the burden of thousands of lives hanging by the thinnest of threads. He remembered laughter, the warmth of a hand clasped tight, the taste of freshly baked bread. He remembered dreaming of a future, of peace, of something more than this endless cycle of violence. And then he remembered the promise he had made to protect them, to be their shield, even at the cost of his own life. With a wild cry, he lunged forward, breaking through the horror, through the fear that clutched his heart. He fought not for survival. He fought for every unfulfilled dream, for every flickering hope that still dared to breathe. Lyra followed him, her eyes alight with a determination that masked a primal terror. Together, she cried, and the word echoed in the air, a spell binding them in a fragile alliance against the encroaching beast. They surged forward, shoulder to shoulder, a reckless unity against the chaos swirling around them. The Titan fell. A colossal shadow crashed to the earth, like a dying star. Gas felt the ground tremble beneath his feet, a moment of triumph amidst the carnage. But victory tasted bitter, and as he looked into the eyes of his comrades, he saw the price of their choices etched upon their faces, where hope intertwined with despair, and glory was shrouded in grief. Yet no sooner had the dust settled than a new roar filled the air, a chilling reminder that the war was far from over. More titanic figures loomed on the horizon, an endless tide of darkness. Gas's heart plummeted into a bottomless abyss of uncertainty. They were trapped, caught in a tempest of unending battles, each fiercer than the last. "Keep fighting," Caden yelled, but a shadow of doubt crept into his voice. "We can't let them break us." The words rang hollow, a desperate mantra against the encroaching gloom. But in that moment, as the sky churned with terror, Gas realized they were fighting more than just titans. They were fighting their own fears, their own ghosts, and the very essence of what it meant to hope. Would they win this war, or would they become just another whisper lost in the shadows of time? As they braced for the next assault, the weight of their choices bore down on them, heavier, it seemed, than the Titans themselves. And in that eerie silence, before the clash of steel against flesh, Gas felt the very universe shift, a cosmic pulse echoing the encroaching chaos, pulling them deeper into the void. The war had only just begun, and they were all but pawns in a game orchestrated by fate. Would they rise as heroes or fall as nameless echoes? The sky roared again as the Titans advanced, and the world around them dissolved into the ether of battle, their heartbeats frozen in unison with the thunder of war. This mortal combat, fraught with despair and bitter victory, was but a dim reflection of the discord festering on the gleaming peaks of Olympus. There, amidst the clouds, the air was thick not only with ambrosia, but with age-old enmity. I stood amidst the ruins of what had once been a radiant temple, now reduced to a jagged pile of stones, soaked in the blood of fallen warriors. The scent of scorched earth and desperation hung in the air like a shroud, an unholy reminder of what was at stake. Above, the sky roared with thunderous clouds, an angry vortex of darkness, as if the cosmos itself writhed in anticipation of the coming battle. I remember the cold steel of my sword, the way it felt like a living entity, a partner in this dance of chaos. I heard the fearful whispers of ancient trees, their leaves trembling under the weight of destiny. But it was not the voice of nature I listened to most intently. It was her voice. Athena stood before me, her gaze fierce and unwavering, a beacon of resolve amidst the encroaching shadows. But beneath that armor of certainty lay a flicker of doubt, a haunting echo of her past failures. "We cannot falter," she said, her voice steady, yet burdened by the weight of 1,000 battles, each decision, each sacrifice a heavy stone in her heart. But doubt was a luxury I could not afford. I felt the cold grip of my own insecurities, a strangely familiar phantom clinging to me. I had always been an outsider, dragged along in the shadows of greatness. I remember my childhood, days spent in the shade of the gods, dreaming of heroism, trembling with fear. And now, here I stood, shoulder to shoulder with deities. But I feared my humanity would be my undoing. As the first roar of battle echoed through the air, I saw Ares. His face was a mask of fury and bloodlust. He thrived in this chaos, reveling in the clash of steel and the cries of suffering. Yet even he bore his own scars, a restless anger that clung to his every move, a desperate need to prove he was more than just a harbinger of war. "This is our moment," he roared, rallying his fellow gods. But I saw the flicker of uncertainty beneath his bravado. "We will crush them." But whom were we to crush? The enemies were not merely mortals. They were the remnants of our own mistakes, the shadows of our past. I felt the weight of their suffering, a reminder that every battle left behind an echo of pain that never truly faded. Memories surged, each a ghost whispering in the depths of my consciousness, reminding me of those I had lost, of friendships torn asunder by conflict, of love that had slipped through my fingers like grains of sand. "Focus." Athena's voice cut through my reverie, a clarion call that pulled my heart back to the present. "We cannot let the shadows consume us." I met her gaze, and in that moment, our fears intertwined, forging a bond born in the crucible of impending doom. My heart pounded, now with a renewed purpose. The battle commenced with a fury that shook the very earth. I plunged into the fray, the clang of metal on metal resonating through my entire being. Each blow felt like a pulse, a rhythm of defiance against despair. The air was thick with cries, with blood, with the agony of a world on the brink of annihilation. I felt every wound as my own. It reverberated deep within me, each scream tearing at the very fabric of my soul. Yet even in the chaos, I sensed signs, flickering embers of something darker, lurking beyond our sight. The shadows whispered secrets, writhing and dancing amidst the ruins, taunting us with the spectre of defeat. Each foe we vanquished seemed to dissolve into mist, a reminder that the battle was not just against flesh and bone, but against the very fleeting nature of hope. It made me question everything I believed. What was the point of this struggle if all we did was succumb to despair? Amidst this turmoil, I saw Ares falter for a single moment. For all his bravado, the weight of his own legacy bore down on him, and I felt it, the silent acknowledgement of lives lost in battles he could never win. "Ares," I cried, my voice cutting through the cacophony. "Fight for them, fight for us." And there it was, the turning point. A flicker in his eyes ignited, a flame of defiance roared, returning to life. "For the fallen," he bellowed. And in that moment, he became more than a god of war. He became the embodiment of every soldier, every mother, every child who had ever feared the cold embrace of the darkness. Together, we surged forward, united in our flaws, our fears, and our desperate hopes. The gods, a motley family of the imperfect and the enraged, fought side by side, pushing back the tide of despair. I felt Athena beside me, her presence an anchor, grounding me as we carved our path through the throng of darkness. But even as we battled the enemy, I heard the echo of laughter. Laughter wild and empty, a reminder that there were those who thrived in this chaos, who sought to hasten the end for their own perverse pleasure. It was laughter that sent a chill down my spine, a promise of betrayal lurking beyond the horizon of our victory. This divine discord had deep roots, stretching back to the very moment the world was young and not yet divided. Lightning rent the sky, like a jagged wound in the fabric of the world, as if the heavens themselves were tearing apart. It was a moment frozen in chaos, a heartbeat suspended in time, as Zeus, king of the gods, stood on the precipice of a decision that could fracture existence itself. I remember the smell of rain mingled with the dust of the earth, a heavy blend of fear and anticipation, as he raised his lightning, a weapon of divine fury, and the air hummed with electric tension. Beside him, Poseidon, the tempestuous god of the sea, clenched his jaw, the fury of the ocean reflected in his sea-green eyes. He was a titan of storms. But today, amidst the brewing tempest, there was something softer, deeper, a yearning for acknowledgement, for power, for the love of a brother who seemed perpetually out of reach. How could Zeus not see? How could he not understand the fragility that lay beneath the surface, the delicate threads of vulnerability woven into Poseidon's mighty form? "I will not bow," Poseidon roared, the fury of 1,000 tides crashing beneath his voice. "This world is not yours to divide." And in that declaration, I could feel the pulse of the earth, the raw primal energy of creation itself, as if the very soil beneath their feet trembled with the weight of their conflict. Hades, the third in their triumvirate, lurked in the shadows, his presence a chilling whisper against the storm. He watched, a dark spectre cloaked in the grim inevitability of fate. I remember the loneliness in his gaze as he surveyed the chaos, a mere step away from the realm of the living, yet forever exiled from their light. The underworld was his domain, a kingdom of lost souls. But even in that darkness, he yearned for connection, for brotherhood. The gnarled roots of envy twisted within him, fueled by the love shared between Zeus and Poseidon, a bond that had grown thick and serpentine over the years. Enough! Zeus's voice boomed, shaking the very clouds. He brandished his lightning, a blazing harbinger of doom. But beneath that power lay a flicker of doubt. The burden of leadership weighed heavily upon his shoulders, a load that threatened to crush him. Every beat of his heart echoed with the fear of failure, the dread of becoming the very tyrant he swore to overthrow. We must decide the fate of our creation, lest chaos reign. I remember the silence that followed, a deep stillness that clung to the air, thick and suffocating. It was the silence that lingers after a storm, when even the birds instinctively hold their breath. It was the moment before the fall, when every soul felt the weight of existence hanging by a thread. Poseidon moved closer, waves crashing in his heart, a cacophony of emotions warring in his chest. "You deem yourself above us, brother," he spat, bitterness thick on his tongue. "But this world does not belong to you alone. I rule the oceans, and without them there is no life. I will not be cast aside." Hades stirred, a shadow among shadows, the pull of the underworld beckoning him. And what of the departed? Do they not deserve a voice? You create life, but I am its finale. Our realms are intertwined, and yet you choose to ignore me. His voice was a haunting melody, imbued with the echoes of countless souls lingering at the edge of their reality, waiting for the moment the gates of the underworld would consume them. In that charged space, where words hung like swords over their heads, each brother grappled with the ghosts of his past. Zeus, the golden child, the favorite, wrestled with the fear of not being good enough, of letting down those who looked to him for guidance. Poseidon, consumed by rage and sorrow, battled waves of resentment that threatened to drown him, while Hades, shrouded in the darkness of rejection, craved a light that never reached him. I remember the storm clouds gathering, heavy with unfallen rain. They swirled and darkened, mirroring the turmoil in their souls. Each rumble of thunder was a cry of suffering, a plea for understanding, for connection. The earth beneath their feet began to tremble, as if it too felt the weight of their unresolved conflict, drawn into the vortex of their emotions. Then, the moment shattered, like glass underfoot, as Zeus, spurred by desperation, unleashed his lightning. Time slowed, and I felt the air grow thick with heat, the scent of ozone enveloping me like a suffocating cloak. The lightning split the sky, illuminating the three gods, each a reflection of the other's storm. "Then let it be so," Zeus cried, his voice a thunderous echo that reverberated through the very fabric of the cosmos. "Let us divide this world, each to his own dominion. But know this, what you choose to rule will forever define our legacy." And in that moment, the decision was made. Lines were drawn in the sand of existence, but the consequences would be dire. Pain would linger, a haunting melody that could never quite fade. A taste of heartbreak hung in the air, a swirling blend of sorrow and hope that knotted in the throat as the very foundations of life trembled at the thought of what was lost and of what was yet to come. Standing against each other with storms raging deep within, I could see a glimpse of the inevitable. The world they would create would be steeped in conflict, their legacy intertwined in blood and thunder. And as they took their first steps toward their respective realms, I felt the pulse of fate quicken, a rhythm that promised neither peace nor resolution. This broken fraternity would cast a long shadow, even over the most sacred of bonds, especially those that were meant to unite the heavens under a single rule. The air crackled with tension, a storm brewing in the hearts of those gathered in the grand hall. Shadows danced wildly on the stone walls, the scent of damp earth mingling with the heavy perfume of roses, a perverted homage to a wedding that had turned into a battlefield. The murmur of the crowd grew, a cacophony of hushed voices, each word a sharp blade slicing through the silence. I stood there, a silent witness, my heart pounding like a war drum, each beat echoing the weight of what was to come. Hera, the bride, stood at the altar, a radiant figure draped in the white silk. But her eyes, oh, those eyes, were stormy seas of defiance and despair. She shifted slightly, her fingers trembling as they clutched the fabric of her gown, a stark contrast to the fiery resolve that crackled beneath the surface. She was not merely a bride. She was a queen in the making, and her marriage was a calculated move in a game far more perilous than love. Opposite her, Zeus, the god of thunder, watched with a searing intensity. His presence loomed like a thundercloud, overwhelming yet captivating. The room seemed small beneath his gaze, and I could almost taste the electricity in the air. But beneath his bravado lay a trembling vulnerability, a fear of losing what he did not yet truly possess. He wanted Hera, yes, but more than that, he craved power, an empire built on the fragile foundation of her love. I could almost hear the whispers of the gods, mocking him, warning him of the storm brewing in her heart. I remember the moment Hera's breath hitched and the world around us dimmed. With a voice that could command the heavens, she spoke. "Do you believe love is enough to bind us, Zeus? Do you believe I am merely an ornament in your grand design?" Each word was a meticulously crafted arrow aimed directly at the heart of their fragile union. Zeus, momentarily stunned, clenched his fists, his knuckles turning white against the gilded edges of the altar. His voice, when he spoke, was low and rumbling, like distant thunder. "Hera, you know what this union signifies. Together we can rule. We can reshape the cosmos." His desperation seeped through a crack in his armor of bravado. The crowd shifted nervously, as if sensing an impending explosion. The air was charged, thick with the tension of unspoken fears and unfulfilled dreams. Hera's laughter rang out, sharp and bitter, slicing through the heavy air like a dagger. "And what of me in your grand vision? A queen without a kingdom, a goddess adorned in silks, suffocated by your shadow." The words tumbled from her lips, venomous yet cloaked in a haunting beauty. I saw the flicker of doubt in her eyes, the realization that their fates were intertwined, yet so fragile. In that moment, I felt the weight of history pressed down upon us. Centuries of power, betrayal, and heartache swirled like phantoms in the corners of the hall. Whispers of the past echoed in my ears, tales of love turned to chains, passion reduced to ash on the tide of ambition. I caught glimpses of long-forgotten ancestors, their faces etched with sorrow, their dreams crushed beneath the weight of a power dynamic that had persisted for centuries. But beneath their conflict lay an undeniable spark, a dangerous chemistry that crackled like wildfire. Even as Hera fought against the chains of expectation, I felt the pull of her heart towards Zeus, a draw as complex and chaotic as the storm that surrounded them. I saw it in the quickening of her breath as he drew closer, in the flicker of longing that ignited in her eyes even as she fought for freedom. With a suddenness that stole my breath, Hera stepped forward, her voice steady, yet laced with an undercurrent of rage. "I refuse to be your pawn, Zeus. I am not a vessel for your ambitions. I will not be silenced. Not now, not ever." Her words reverberated off the cold stone, echoing in the hearts of all who dared to listen. But as her declaration hung in the air, something shifted. A hush fell over the crowd, the kind of silence that fills you with dread, as if the universe itself held its breath. It was then that I saw it, a flicker of fear in Zeus's eyes, a crack in the facade of his power. He was not merely a god. He was a man, terrified of the unraveling threads of his meticulously woven tapestry. In that charged moment, I felt the universe draw them closer, a magnetic force beyond reason. The collision was inevitable, a storm of emotions brewing between them. The very ground beneath us trembled, and for a fleeting instant, the air grew thick with the promise of despair and raw passion. Yet, even as hope flickered, the threat of betrayal lingered like a shadow. "You will fight me then?" Zeus's voice was a low growl, deep and resonant, but I felt the tremor beneath it. "You will defy the very fabric of destiny?" "Fight you?" Hera's laughter now was wild, unrestrained. "No, my dear Zeus, I will not fight. I will rise." Her eyes blazed with a furious resolve, a fire that threatened to consume all in its path. The moment held its breath, and with agonizing certainty, I knew this was only the beginning. Love intertwined with power, ambition clashed with desire, and fate hung in the balance, waiting to ensnare them both in its ruthless grip. Unseen forces were at play, the threads of destiny weaving an intricate dance from which neither could escape. As the hall shook with the weight of their words, I stood frozen, unable to tear my gaze from the storm about to erupt. The air crackled with anticipation, the inevitable clash of titans, fueled by passion and pride, a reckoning that would echo through time. But Hera's defiance was not the first flame of rebellion ignited against the king of the gods. Long before, another titan dared the ultimate rebellion. The night was a fathomless void, an endless expanse of silence broken only by the distant echo of despair. The air crackled with tension, charged with the knowledge that something monumental was about to transpire. I stood at the edge of an abyss, the looming shadows of the titans dancing on the walls of my consciousness, their whispers scratching at my sanity. Cronus, his name hung heavy, a malevolent spectre breathing down the neck of every living soul. He was the embodiment of time, a cruel puppeteer, snipping the threads of existence with the precision of a surgeon wielding a scalpel. And then there was Prometheus, a flicker of defiance against the encroaching darkness. I saw him, fierce and resolute, his eyes burning with a fire that promised liberation. He was not merely a titan, he was a spark, an unyielding flame against the icy grip of tyranny. The weight of his choice hung heavy in the air. Each heartbeat was a countdown to the inevitable clash between light and shadow. I remember the night he stole fire from Olympus, fire that would ignite hope in the hearts of mortals. I remember the prison of his thoughts. Shadows coiled around his mind, like tendrils of smoke. Every thought was a stream of rebellion. Would mortals understand this gift? Would they embrace the fire, or let it consume them. But deep within the recesses of his heart, an unease gnawed, a growl, relentless. He was not merely a fire-bringer. He was a brother, a guardian. The cries of his siblings echoed in his ears, their faces flickering like candlelight in the dead of night. They will rise against Cronus, he whispered to himself, though doubt crept in like frost in his veins. If not, then what have I done? And then there was Atlas, his brother, forever burdened by the weight of the heavens. I saw him, his shoulders slumped, his eyes glazed with the agony of eternity. His spirit was shackled, a prisoner of his own strength, forced to bear the weight of the world while a tyrant ruled unopposed. The ground trembled beneath their feet, a reminder that even the strongest Titan could be crushed under such despair. "Why do you fight, Prometheus?" Atlas asked, his voice a low rumble, heavy with the weariness of ages. "What do you hope to gain? You risk everything." "I hope for tomorrow," Prometheus replied, the fire in his eyes unwavering. "I hope they remember. I hope they learn." A chill swept through the air. The ghost of the unknown lingered beyond their resolve. The ground shook, violent tremors rattling their bones, and Cronus's shadows drew closer, as if drawn by their defiance. The darkness was alive, a sentient entity whispering promises of despair, feeding on their doubts. But Prometheus stood tall. He was the embodiment of hope. He was the flame that refused to be extinguished. I saw the tension in his muscles, the way he clenched his fists, his heart thundering like a war drum, echoing in the abyss. He made his choice, a defiant act that turned the tide of fate itself. In a world where silence seemed a scream, he moved. With each step, he felt the weight of existence pressing down on him. What would it mean to ignite this fire in humanity? Would they forge their own chains? Or would they rise like phoenixes from the ashes of their ignorance? The confrontation loomed, an inevitable clash tightening its grip around their throats. Cronus, a dark silhouette, drew nearer, and Prometheus felt the suffocating pull of despair. It squeezed his heart, icy fingers coiling around his resolve, whispering of failure. "You are but a flicker against a storm," it hissed, a single ember against a hurricane. But as the shadows drew nearer, he found strength in his brethren, in their shared memories of laughter, of dreams. He recalled the warmth of their childhood, how they danced in fields of starlight, how they embraced the night as if it were a lover. The echoes of joy collided with the reality of their plight, fueling the fire within him. "Atlas, remember our dreams." Prometheus's voice rang out, fierce and unyielding. "Remember who we are." Atlas's gaze shifted, his shoulders tensing under the burden of hope. "And what if we falter? What if Cronus extinguishes us before we light the world?" The question hung in the air, a phantom of doubt that threatened to unravel them. But in that moment of uncertainty, I felt a spark ignite between them, an unbreakable bond forged in the crucible of their shared struggle. Together, they were more than titans. They were brothers, resolute against the tide. And then, the ground beneath them cracked open, fissures revealing a deeper darkness, as if the earth itself shuddered at the thought of their rebellion. Shadows danced like spectres, taunting and teasing, whispering promises of despair. But Prometheus stood firm, a beacon in the storm. "Let them come," he roared into the void, his voice a clarion call that echoed in the darkness. "Let them come and face the flame." This great gift, the spark of divine fire, was passed to humanity. But how did they wield it? The air crackled with tension, each breath thick with the weight of unspoken fears. I stand at the precipice of chaos, a distant glow of fire flickering like a heartbeat against the backdrop of the night sky. A heartbeat that resonates within me, steady yet wild, a reminder of the power I have unleashed. The flames dance, sinuous and alluring, casting shadows that writhe and distort into nightmarish forms. It feels as though the very essence of creation and destruction swirls around me, whispering secrets I can neither comprehend nor ignore. Lucia is there, her voice rising above the crackle of the fire, desperation laced through her words. You can't just throw it all away, Marcus. We had a plan. Her hands tremble, framing her face, her eyes bright and furious, yet shadowed with sorrow. She stands on a knife's edge between fear and rage, a warrior trapped in a war she herself created. I see it in the glint of her irises, a flickering phantom of deferred dreams, a future that is now shattering like glass under the weight of our choices. I remember when we first spoke of fire, curled beneath the stars, two children in a world that seemed infinite. Fire is life, I said then, my voice dripping with impatience to conquer the universe. It opens doors, it brings warmth, it creates. But those words now seem like ashes scattered to the wind, and I cannot help but wonder if I was ever right. I cast a glance at the inferno, flames licking at the sky, and I feel a surge of guilt rise within me, a gnawing beast with the claws of regret. And then there's Elias, caught in the crossfire of our chaos. His skin gleams with sweat, his eyes wide with terror. Stop, just stop, both of you. His voice cuts through the tension like a knife, but it's a fragile sound, trembling at the edges. He is the peacemaker, the one who always believed love could conquer all. But love feels so distant now, like a fading echo in this landscape of fire and ruin. I see betrayal in his eyes. I feel it gnawing at his soul. He trusted me. He believed in the dream. I remember the first time I saw fire, the way it flared, drawing me in, promising warmth, but promises burn too. The words spill out, raw and jagged. The memory sears itself into my mind. The first flash of flame ignited something within me. Rebellion, a thirst for something more than this bleak existence. But rebellion often comes with a price, and that price hangs heavy in the air tonight. Marcus, you think you are a god. Lucia snaps, her voice strained, taut like a wire about to snap. But you are not. You are just a man, a fool playing with fire. Her words strike me like a slap, igniting the smoldering embers of my pride. I want to scream, to tell her it wasn't about power, not about divinity. It was about liberation. But liberation is a double-edged sword, isn't it? With every swing comes blood. With every flare comes destruction. The fire roars in response, hungry and chaotic, a living beast that sees no distinction between creation and annihilation. It licks the sky, the heat enveloping me like a suffocating shroud. I feel it pulling at my heart, beckoning me to embrace its wildness, its beauty, regardless of the cost. But at what cost? I stare into that wild flame and see my reflection, and it's a face I barely recognize. Elias steps forward, his hands raised, as if to shield us from the truth. You must see what you are doing. This is no longer about us. It's about everyone. His voice cracks, the weight of the world shattering against his spirit. The shadows seem to lean closer, taunting, as if they know the truth, that I stand on the precipice of a decision that could consume us all. Everyone, I hiss, bitterness seeping from my lips. Do you think that's what I was trying to do? I wanted to change everything. I wanted to bring life. But the desperation in my voice rings hollow, and I feel the ground crumble beneath my feet, the very foundation of my beliefs disintegrating like ash in the wind. Lucia's breath hitches, her eyes glisten with unshed tears. And at what cost, Marcus? At what cost? The question hangs in the air, heavy with the weight of our shared history. The dreams we wove together now lie in ruins. I want to pull her into my embrace, shield her from this nightmare we have wrought. But the distance between us feels insurmountable, a chasm filled with doubt and despair. I remember, I whisper, but the memories play tricks on me, shifting like shadows in the flickering light. I remember when we thought we could change the world, but change comes like a thief in the night, stealing the innocence of our intentions. The flames creep closer, engulfing our voices, our words, stifling any hope of resolution. I feel the heat on my skin, a warning, a plea, a reminder of the fragility of existence, of dreams ignited only to be consumed. Elias falls silent, his shoulders shaking, a shadow of the man I once knew, burdened by the weight of our choices. And Lucia, fierce yet fragile, stands amidst the chaos, a warrior without a battlefield. Each beat of my heart echoes the stakes we play. The fire rages, each crackle a reminder of our pride, each flare a fleeting promise of what might have been. The world seems to hold its breath, suspended in a moment of disbelief, as the flames rise higher, illuminating the darkness that lurks within us. I feel the pull of despair tightening around my chest, the weight of our actions threatening to crush the very essence of who we are. I want to scream, to fight against the tide of destruction we have set in motion. But the truth is, I stand here, a man who once dreamed of wielding fire, and now the fire wields me. And in this moment, as chaos swirls around us, I realize that the consequences of our choices reach far beyond the flicker of flame. They are woven into the very fabric of our souls, a haunting melody that will echo long after the fire has died. It is a gift, yes, but also a curse, a legacy of Prometheus, intertwined with our own. I look at Lucia, at Elias, and for a fleeting moment, I see the ghosts of our dreams reflected in their eyes. What have we done? I whisper, the words falling like ash between us, heavy and unyielding. The fire roars, a chilling reminder that we are not merely witnesses to our fate. We are the architects, and this is only the beginning. The Titan's gift brought chaos to Earth. But what was happening on Olympus during this time? The air crackled with tension, a shadow falling over the very heart of Olympus. It was not a gentle twilight, but a violent eclipse, a dark omen swirling above. Thunder rolled, a pulse of divine power, igniting hearts with both trepidation and terror. In a hidden chamber, beneath the weight of celestial light, a soul teetered on the brink of creation. I remember that silence, breath held, a stillness so profound it felt alive, mocking the chaos outside. It whispered secrets, echoing my deepest fears. I stood there, trembling, knowing something monumental was about to occur, yet unable to grasp its immensity. In that moment, Zeus, king of the gods, held his breath, his eyes a tempest of confusion and anticipation. He was not a philosopher god, perched meticulously atop ethereal contemplation. No, he was a father, grappling with the jagged edges of his own mortality, feeling the weight of what it meant to create. Echoes of his past surged like a flood, each memory a wave crashing against the rocky shores of his heart. The women he had wronged, the lives woven into his reckless pursuit of desire, haunted him like restless spirits. How could he craft a being of wisdom when he himself was so flawed, so prone to error? And there was Metis, the one who had slipped through his fingers, the goddess of wisdom, now entomized within the womb of his own creation. I felt her presence, a mixture of defiance and submission, writhing in the shadows, a storm struggling against the shackles of fate. She was thought incarnate, a shimmering flame of intellect, brimming with the promise of greatness. And yet, here she was, ensnared in the web of Zeus's design, a captive of love and power, twisted by the very hands that once cherished her. "I remember," Metis whispered softly, "the laughter we shared, the light we created together. But what is laughter without freedom? What is love without truth?" Her words sliced through the tension, and I felt a pang of sorrow for the choices they had made, choices that would echo through time like stones dropped into a still pond, ripples altering destinies. The clock ticked in the background, each second a heartbeat, each minute an inevitable sigh. As the moments stretched, the air grew thicker, suffocating, impenetrable. I felt the bitter taste of fear mingled with hope. Was it possible? Could wisdom emerge from this turmoil? Would Athena, the goddess of strategy and war, be born from such chaos? And then, like lightning tearing through the sky, it happened. With a roar that shook the very foundations of Olympus, Zeus unleashed his power. A power so primal and raw, it felt as though the very earth split open beneath my feet. In that instant, Metis cried out, not in despair, but in a wild cry of joy and defiance. She surrendered to the storm, a tempest of love, agony, and fierce determination. Her essence merged with his, creating something entirely, irrevocably new. I felt the air shift, a palpable charge igniting the space around me. I saw her shimmer at the edge of reality, a figure taking shape from the chaos, forged from the depths of heartache and brilliance. Athena emerged not from a fleshly womb, but from a union of thought and force, a being radiating an aura of power and wisdom that sent shivers down my spine. She was born amidst the cacophony of light and shadow. Her first cry, a battle cry that rang through the heavens, an echo of all the fears, hopes, and broken dreams that led to her creation. In that moment, I saw her, fierce and unyielding, yet also achingly human, the weight of the world resting upon her shoulders. She was warrior and sage, balancing between the realms of conflict and peace, a living paradox. As she opened her eyes, the cosmos shifted, stars aligning into a new constellation that spoke of destiny, of challenges, and of an uncertain future. I felt their connection, an unbreakable bond between mother and daughter, a legacy forged in the crucible of sacrifice. But shadows loomed, lurking at the edges of her brilliance, shadows of doubt and fear that threatened to consume her whole. Would she rise above her origins, or would she be consumed by the very power that birthed her? Zeus, trembling with uncertainty, reached out to her, the essence of a father grappling with the knowledge that greatness can come at a price. "My daughter," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "You are the culmination of wisdom and might. But remember, with such power comes an infinite weight." "No, father," Athena replied, her voice steady, yet laced with the tremor of unspoken fears. "It is not the weight of power that burdens me, but the fear of failing to wield it justly." I saw her fire, the heart of a warrior tempered by the mind of a sage. It was a fragile light, flickering against the encroaching darkness, a beacon in the storm. And suddenly, I was thrust back into the chaos. The storm outside the chamber raged against the walls of Olympus. The world shuddered, and I saw it. A distant battle brewed, gods and mortals intertwined in a dance of destruction. Athena's birth was not merely an event. It was a declaration, a promise that wisdom would rise from the ashes of chaos. The heavens would shake, and the earth would tremble. And through it all, one truth would remain. In the shadows of greatness lay the ever-looming spectre of sacrifice. I felt the intensity of the moment build, rising like an ocean tide. I could not look away. I was caught, captivated by the maelstrom of creation, the heart of Olympus beating in a desperate rhythm. Would she lead us to glory? Or were we doomed to repeat the mistakes of the past? The answer lingered, a whisper in the storm, echoing in the chasms of time, leaving me breathless and craving more. A new goddess was born, but the old intrigues had not faded. Thunder boomed in the cavernous skies above Olympus, a low growl of displeasure. I stood there, gasping, my heart pounding like a war drum, watching the storm swirl with an intensity that mirrored the turmoil amongst the gods. Lightning flickered, illuminating the sweaty faces of my brethren, their eyes reflecting the chaos brewing not only in the heavens, but in their souls. Betrayal, ambition, fear. The air reeked of ozone and despair, a cocktail of emotions poised to explode. "Why have you returned, Hermes?" Alecto's voice sliced through the tension like a blade, her dark eyes gleaming with malice. She stood at the edge of the storm, a tempest of her own making, casting a shadow that stretched like a web across the gathering. I felt the weight of her gaze, 1,000 unspoken questions hanging in the electrified air, but one loomed larger than the rest: loyalty. Hermes, the messenger, shifted uncomfortably, the very embodiment of indecision. Because I must." His voice cracked, trembling like the fragile strings of fate. Once a beacon of light and laughter, he now carried the heavy burden of secrets, a weight that bent his shoulders. I saw that struggle within him between duty and the desire to flee, an internal war that raged with every beat of his heart. Alecto laughed, a sound as hollow as the void between the stars. "Whom do you owe your allegiance to? Us or him?" She nodded towards the throne, where Zeus sat, an imposing figure shrouded in shadows and thunder, the very image of power, yet hidden by the doubts of his own creation. His eyes, once warm and inviting, now held the icy grip of winter, piercing and unyielding. I remembered the tales, the stories of his ascent, how he had overthrown Cronus, the Titan father who consumed his own children out of fear of being overthrown. I remembered the blood, the screams, the power coursing through Zeus's veins like a drug, intoxicating and corrupting. But now, as he sat there, I saw a flicker of doubt, a crack in the armor of the once invincible god. "Are you with me?" Zeus's voice boomed, resonating through the air. But beneath it lay a tremor, a thread of uncertainty that gnawed at the edges of his authority. It echoed, a question he seemed to pose not only to Hermes, but to every god present. Its weight hung between us, a tangible thing that squeezed my chest. I felt the tension building, like a tide, rising higher with each passing second. "And what if?" Alecto's tone shifted, laced with a chilling sweetness. "There is a better way." Her words dripped with venom, a siren's call that beckoned those who craved power and vengeance, those who felt the sting of being overlooked, of being underestimated. I caught Hermes' eye, saw a flicker of fear and defiance. He was a reflection of us all, those who craved recognition, validation in a world ruled by a god whose very essence was power. "You cannot trust her," it slipped out, his voice rough, desperation scratching at his throat. "This is not just about us. It's about balance, about the fate of all." I watched the confrontation unfold, emotions flaring like wildfire. Alecto's smile twisted, her piercing gaze locked onto Hermes, her eyes dark and bottomless, as if she could swallow him whole. "Do you truly think Zeus cares about balance, about anything other than his throne?" The words dripped like acid, corroding the fragile threads of unity we had strived so hard to build. "Stop!" I shouted, the word echoing off the mountains, a plea laced with fear. "We cannot let this consume us. We cannot be pawns in this game of thrones." My heart hammered against my ribs as I looked at them, two souls intertwined in a dance of power and consequence, their destinies weaving tighter with each beat. Zeus's brow furrowed, the weight of a titan pressing down on him. "I am your king," he said, but I felt the tremor in his voice, the uncertainty hiding beneath the surface. How long could he maintain this facade? We were not mere subjects to his rule. We were his family, his kin. Yet the shadows of his past loomed, threatening to engulf us all. I felt memories flood me, waves crashing against rocks, epic battles, friendships forged, and the inevitable betrayals that followed. The gods we once were, vibrant and untouchable, were stained by ambition and pride. "We must unite," I pleaded, desperation scratching at my throat. "We cannot let the darkness divide us. We are stronger together." But the storm raged on, a reflection of our broken hearts. Each clap of thunder echoed the discord simmering beneath the surface. I felt the cracks forming in our fragile alliance, a fissure threatening to erupt into chaos. "I remember," I whispered, more to myself than to them. "I remember when we fought side by side, when our laughter filled the halls of Olympus. When did we become shadows of ourselves?" The air grew thick. Silence descended upon us like a funeral shroud. The weight of memories was too much to bear. "Join me, Hermes." Alecto's voice was a silken whisper, seductive and dangerous. "Together, we can rewrite history. We can be more than cogs in his machine." The temptation hung in the air, swaying like a pendulum, a choice laid before him like the proverbial apple of discord. The world around us seemed to tremble, energy shifting, swirling, tightening with each passing moment. I felt it in my bones, the inevitability of the confrontation to come. The atmosphere crackled with tension, the ground beneath us trembling with the weight of our choices. Zeus's grip on his lightning tightened, a flash of anger igniting within him. "You think I will not defend what is mine?" His voice boomed, a clap of thunder that reverberated through the very fabric of Olympus. But I saw the flicker of fear behind his furious gaze, the fear of losing everything. I realized then that we stood on the precipice, balanced between the past we once cherished and the uncertain future that loomed ahead. The storm raged on, a metaphor for our souls, and I understood that more than just power was at stake. There were bonds to be forged or broken, destinies to be claimed or lost forever. "Choose wisely," I breathed, the weight of my own uncertainty crashing down upon me. "For what lies ahead may change us all." The words hung in the air, charged and electric, as we stood on the brink of fate, our hearts pounding as one. Each beat a reminder that the struggle for power amongst the gods had only just begun. The male gods waged wars and spun intrigues. But what of the goddesses? Their tragedies were quieter, but no less devastating. Flames flickered wildly in the hearth, casting shadows that danced like lost souls across the walls of the dimly lit temple. Hestia stood there, her heart a relentless drum, her gaze fixed on the embers, each spark a reminder of a long extinguished warmth. It was in that moment, as the air grew thick with the scent of smoke and something nameless, that her solitude was broken. Hestia, Hera's voice, sharp and imperious, sliced through the stillness like a knife, demanding attention, demanding acknowledgement. Hestia turned slowly, her brow furrowed in confusion. Hera stood in the doorway, framed by the darkness that hung like a shroud behind her. The regal goddess radiated tension, her eyes blazing with a fury that felt almost tangible. "They are coming for us, Hestia. They want us to bow, to yield." There was an urgency in her tone, a rough edge that echoed with the weight of responsibility. Blood ran cold in Hestia's veins, her heartbeat a frantic reminder of what was at stake. I remember when Olympus was a sanctuary, a place of warmth and laughter, not a battlefield. Memories clung to her like ghosts, haunting and bittersweet. But now all she felt was the chill of encroaching chaos. Hera moved closer, her voice softening just enough to expose the cracks beneath her furious facade. "And yet, we are drawn into this storm, dragged into the shadows by forces beyond us. Demeter, she is losing herself." The name hung in the air like a curse, heavy with unspoken grief. Deep within the earth, Demeter was a spectre of despair, her spirit intertwined with the roots of the world she nurtured. "I remember the day she laughed," Hestia whispered, a tremor in her voice. Her laughter was the sound of sunlight breaking through the clouds. But that laughter had long since faded, replaced by a silence that echoed across the fields, barren and desolate. Now she sits in darkness, mourning the loss of her daughter, her heart a barren landscape. Hera's voice cracked, exposing the vulnerable goddess beneath the armor of power. "I fear she will never rise again." The thought of Demeter, once vibrant and full of life, reduced to a shadow, twisted Hestia's gut like a dagger. The flames in the hearth roared, a disquieting reflection of the turmoil within them. Hestia stepped forward, her fists clenched, her resolve hardening. "We must reach her. We must remind her of the light before it is too late." Her mind raced, recalling the whispers of the earth, the faint hum of life that still thrummed beneath the surface. But Hera shook her head, a storm brewing in her eyes. "And what if she does not wish to be found?" Each word was a shard of glass, slicing into Hestia's heart. "What if our love is not enough to pull her from the abyss?" Fear was a living thing, coiling around them, suffocating them. "I remember," Hestia began, her voice a soft plea. "I remember us gathering together, how we supported each other through storms. We were strong together." But with Demeter trapped in the depths of her sorrow and Hera struggling to maintain her grip on Olympus, that fierce unity felt like a distant memory, a dream slipping through their fingers. The temple seemed alive, the walls trembling with the weight of their emotions. Shadows flickered and writhed, revealing glimpses of their shared past, the laughter, the warmth of sisterhood that once bound them. "I need you both," Hestia breathed, the words echoing like a prayer, heavy with desperation. "We cannot let the darkness consume us whole." The storm within Hera raged, tension crackling in the air like static. "And if we fail," her voice was soft, yet fierce, laced with the bitterness of doubt. Hestia stepped forward, closing the distance between them. Then we fall fighting, but we cannot lose hope. Not now. The light from the fire danced in her eyes, igniting a flicker of resolve in Hera's heart. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind swept into the temple, extinguishing the flames. Darkness enveloped them, a tangible void that pressed against their skin. "Demeter!" Hestia called into the darkness, her voice trembling yet unyielding. "We are here." The echo of her words dissolved into the silence, swallowed by the shadows that had drawn nearer. They stood together, cloaked in darkness, each heartbeat a whisper of courage. But the shadows were alive, pulsing with despair. Each flicker of doubt threatened to extinguish their resolve. "We must go to her," Hestia repeated, her voice firm, igniting a spark of rebellion against the encroaching gloom. With a nod, Hera joined her, the fire slowly returning to their souls, illuminating the path ahead. Together, they gathered their strength, hearts pounding as one, ready to face whatever lay beyond. But the shadows had eyes, and they watched, waiting for a moment of weakness, a crack in their armor. And somewhere deep within the earth, Demeter lingered, a phantom of her former self. The weight of the world pressed down on her shoulders, her heart a barren garden of pain. "Mother, where are you?" she called into the void, her voice cracking with a strain of longing. The darkness answered her with silence, a cruel reminder of all that was lost. But above her, Hestia and Hera pressed onward, their bond a shimmering flame against the encroaching night. They would reach her. They had to before the shadows consumed them all. The clock was ticking, each second a heartbeat, each heartbeat a promise of hope. And in that moment, the world held its breath, awaiting the clash of light and darkness, the rebirth of love and the fight against despair. Their journey had begun, the path winding through the darkness. But the light of sisterhood flickered ahead, promising salvation, hope, and the possibility of a new dawn. The gods suffered and fought, and their actions ricocheted upon those at the very bottom. There, where the divine world ended and the mortal began, equally intense dramas unfolded. A dim, flickering light cast shadows that danced across the damp stone walls. Each flicker was a heartbeat, a reminder that nothing in this desolate place was ever truly still. I stood at the threshold, my breath caught in my throat as the air grew thick with the scent of decay and despair. The silence was a living thing, pressing against my skin, enveloping me like a shroud. Was it the weight of the underworld, or my own regret that made my heart pound so rapidly? Distant moans echoed in the darkness, a haunting symphony of souls yearning for the sun's warmth, the wind's kiss. I remembered each cry was a reminder of their chains, of the merciless grip of Hades's domain. I clasped my hands, feeling the cold seep into my bones, and whispered, "Why are you here?" But the question was directed at myself, not at the shadows that trembled with their own pain. I had come seeking answers, but here, in this bleak abyss, all I found was suffocating fear and the acrid taste of loss. Phantoms swirled around me, their eyes like glowing embers, flickering with unquenched rage, regret, longing. They were trapped in a limbo of their own making, just as I was. I was not alone. Beside me stood Orpheus, his face a mask of suffering. His fingers trembled, poised over the lyre that once coaxed a melody sweeter than honey. Now, the strings held only echoes, ghosts of the past vibrating in the air. "I remember her laughter," he mumbled, a shadow consuming his words. I remember how her smile could light up the darkest corners of my soul. The memory crushed him, a boulder of grief lodged in his chest. I saw it, the way his shoulders slumped, burdened by the weight of loss. Eurydice, that name hung between us like a noose, tight and menacing. He had dared to descend into these depths to reclaim her, to defy the finality of departure. A foolish dream, perhaps, but how does one measure love against despair? Yet standing beside him, I felt the weight of my own broken heart. I too had known loss, the kind of loss that twists your insides, that keeps you awake at night, drowning in a sea of what-ifs. There was a time I believed I could outrun my mistakes. But here, in this afterlife, every choice loomed, a phantom of my own making. Why do we torture ourselves? I asked, my voice a whisper lost in the shadows. Why do we return to these memories, knowing the pain they will bring? Hades rose from his throne, a disturbing figure cloaked in darkness. His voice was a cold caress. Because, dear souls, pain is the only proof of life. His eyes, two black holes of despair, bored into us. You think you can escape your ghosts. You carry them with you always. I shuddered, for he spoke a truth wrapped in bitterness. The ghosts of my past danced, taunting. Every mistake, every regret, a reminder that I was never free. Orpheus clenched his jaw, defiance blooming in his chest. I will not succumb to this despair, he declared, though his voice trembled like the strings of his lyre. But Hades merely smiled, a sound that echoed like the tolling of a bell, both ominous and sardonic. You wish to reclaim what you cannot hold. A foolish endeavor, Orpheus. Love cannot conquer all. In that moment, I felt the tremor of his words shake my very being. I remembered nights spent in longing, hoping for a love that had slipped through my fingers like sand. And what if love is our only weapon? I countered, a fire igniting in my chest. What if it's the only thing that makes us human? Human. Hades spat the word like a curse. You think humanity is defined by love? No, it is chaos and destruction, the darkest corners of the heart unleashed. With each word, I felt the crushing weight of the underworld closing in, the shadows coiled tighter around me. Orpheus then made his choice, not for himself, but for Eurydice. He raised his lyre, the strings vibrating with an intensity that fractured the silence, a desperate plea that echoed into the void. Music poured forth, a cascade of sorrow and longing that snaked through the air like a serpent. It enveloped the spirits, lifting them, touching their hearts with bittersweet memories of love. I saw it in their eyes, a flicker of hope igniting like a spark in the darkness. Eurydice, he sang, his voice raw and trembling. I will find you. But as the last note faded into the suffocating silence, a sense of dread bloomed in my gut. The shadows pulsed, quivering with a life of their own. Hades' gaze narrowed, and I felt the tremor of impending doom. Foolish child, Hades hissed, and the very walls of the underworld seemed to shudder in response. You play with fire, and the flames will consume you. I understood then that we stood on the brink of something terrible. The tension was thick and electric. It was a fragile thread we danced upon, love versus despair, hope versus darkness. Orpheus's resolve radiated like a beacon, but the shadows crept closer, hungry for extinguished dreams. Remember, Hades whispered, the deeper you plunge into the light, the darker the shadows become. I was captivated by the maelstrom, feeling both the crushing weight of history and the agonizing yearning for redemption. Memories surged, relentless and unforgiving. I recalled my own battles with love, with loss, with the very essence of what it meant to be alive, here, now, in this cursed afterlife. And just as the storm within me reached its crescendo, the ground beneath us trembled, threatening to swallow us whole. Orpheus's song lingered in the air, a bittersweet reminder that sometimes the struggle is all there is. The tension tightened, each breath a countdown to a moment that could change everything. Shadows loomed, music echoed, and I stood at a crossroads of despair and hope, caught in the shimmering dance of love and loss, awaiting the final note to fall. Orpheus challenged Hades, but other mortals dared to challenge the rest of the gods. A chilling stillness hung over Mount Olympus, like the ghost of a forgotten dream, heavy with the promise of chaos. The air crackled, thick with tension, as if the very fabric of reality was about to tear. I stood at the edge of an abyss, my heart hammering against my ribs, sweat mingling with the cold of the wind that gusted across the summit. Below, the world unfolded like a tapestry of greens and blues. But above, oh, above, the clouds churned like a brewing storm. Each breath felt borrowed, each heartbeat echoed a warning. And I was not alone. "Are you ready for this?" Cassia whispered, her breath a soft phantom against the howling wind. Her eyes, once bright pools of mischief, were shadowed with doubt. She had always been the spark, the one who dared to dance in the flames. But today, that fire flickered uncertainly. I caught a glimpse of her fingers, twitching, nervous and restless, as if she were trying to conjure strength from the very earth beneath us. "I don't think I ever will be," I replied, my voice steadier than my heart felt. The truth scratched at my throat. I remembered the stories, the gods, their wrath, their fickleness, every thread woven into the fabric of our lives, binding us to a fate we couldn't escape. The weight of that legacy settled upon my shoulders, almost suffocating. I glanced at Adonis, his chiseled features tight with concentration, as he fixed his gaze on the horizon. A warrior, ready to meet an army of shadows. "Focus," he said, his voice a low rumble, both command and plea. I admired him even in this moment of terror. How could he remain so resolute when doubt gnawed at me from within like a ravenous beast? His immaculate facade hid a depth I often felt unworthy to gaze upon. We must confront them before they consume us. Consume us. Cassia's laugh was fragile, breaking under the weight of fear. "You speak as if it's easy. We are not warriors. We are just us." But I couldn't shake the feeling that we were more than mere mortals, that our very existence danced on the edge of divine catastrophe. I remembered when we first spoke of Olympus. That night the stars told stories of power and betrayal, of dreams woven into the very fabric of the cosmos. Cassia had laughed then, her laugh like shattering glass, wild and free. "Imagine," she'd said, her eyes alight with mischief, "a place where gods quarrel over which mortal to favor, while we toil and bleed below. What a farce! A farce." But here we stood, on the precipice of that divine stage, and all the absurdity had turned into a nightmare. I felt the spectres of ancient conflicts swirling around us, carried on the wind, whispering secrets of madness and ambition. "And what if they refuse to speak?" I asked, the words slipping from my lips like shadows, dark and ominous. The thought tightened my throat, knotting itself. Legends spoke of their wrath, of Zeus hurling lightning with a flick of his wrist, of Hera's jealousy manifesting as storms that ravaged the land. I swallowed, glancing at Cassia and Adonis, their faces illuminated by the flickering light of our makeshift fire. Shadows danced around us like spectres. "They will speak," Adonis said, stubbornness woven into his tone. "If we are brave enough to speak." "Brave or foolish," Cassia countered, and for a moment I saw the old spark flash in her eyes, but it flickered, dimming under the weight of reality. The ground shuddered, a deep rumble resonating beneath our feet, and the air grew thick, electric. It felt like the heartbeat of some ancient beast awakening, and fear clawed at me from within. In that moment, I mourned the comfort of ignorance, the bliss of not knowing what lay ahead. I remembered the tales of the Titans, how they were cast out from Olympus, their screams echoing through the ages. What if we joined them? Before I could voice my fears, a flash of light tore through the clouds, brilliant and blinding, illuminating the mountain with an otherworldly glow. Within the radiance, outlines began to form, figures cloaked in garments that shimmered like the surface of a restless sea. They appeared one by one, their faces both familiar and terrifying. A gallery of gods and goddesses, each a reflection of our deepest anxieties and our boldest dreams. And there they were, Zeus, his presence imperious, Hera, regal and unyielding, Poseidon, waves crashing behind him. Each god's gaze pierced the veil of time, holding within it ages of expectation and judgment. "What brings mortals to my domain?" Zeus thundered, his voice a storm that shook the very earth beneath us. "We come to parley," Adonis declared, though every ounce of his bravado felt like a fragile facade. "To understand why." "Why?" Hera interrupted, her voice melodic and sharp as a blade. "Why should we care for the whims of mortals? You exist to serve our needs, not the other way around." Cassia stepped forward, emboldened by something deep within, a whisper of defiance perhaps. "But we are not mere puppets. We are not bound by your whims. We have dreams too. Love, loss, hope. You think you can dictate our lives like a game of dice. We refuse to be your playthings." The silence that followed was deafening. The gods' gazes, like knives, sliced through the air. I held my breath, caught in the tides of fate. I wanted to scream, to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to flee. "Then you must face the consequences," Zeus said, his voice a thunderclap, resonating in the very marrow of the mountain. I felt time contract, a serpent tightening its grip. The weight of choice hung, suffocating, as we stood before the titans of our own creation, the embodiment of our fears and desires. And in that moment, I understood. We were not mere mortals. We were the architects of our own destinies, caught in the web of gods and monsters, of shadows and light, of dreams and nightmares. As the confrontation loomed, the air was thick with unspoken words and unyielding truths. I felt the cosmic dance of fate swirl around us, an inescapable rhythm pulling me deeper into the abyss. The night shimmered with stars that held ancient stories, and I realized that perhaps, just perhaps, we were destined to rewrite the tales that bound us. And though the outcome was unknown, one truth remained. We were alive, and in this very moment, we were strong. The gods could hear our voices rise against the storm, the broken echo of humanity, defiant and unyielding, ready to claim their place in the symphony of existence.